7 p.m. on the Alternative Voice this evening with myself, Inayet Wadee. And we are now going across to the United States of America. And we are going to be joined by Sheikh Yawar Baig. Now, this comes against the background of the killing of George Floyd. And the whole question surrounding racism has reared its ugly head right across the entire world. People expressing their disgust and their concern with regards to racism. But let us also look at racism from within us, within our communities, within the Muslim communities. And for many of us, not only in South Africa, but right across the entire world, where we live in diverse communities, in multicultural communities, the whole question of racism obviously comes about. And we know from the final khutbah and on the plains of Arafah, where the Prophet of Allah, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, had made it very, very clear in terms of superiority of one race over the other. And that is why we are talking with Sheikh Yawar Baig out of the United States. Sheikh Yawar, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inayet, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. And you, Sheikh Yawar?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakumullah khair. Very well indeed.
Right, Sheikh Yawar, let's talk about it. I know we've got a lot to talk about on this particular subject of racism. And I've followed your tweets, and I've also followed a lot of advices that you've given the people of South Africa, and also, I suppose, to people right across the entire world with regards to the topic of racism. Now, we've seen the ugliness as a result of the killing of George Floyd in the United States of America. And racism is going to be under the radar. It is going to be under the spotlight. And particularly for us as a Muslim community, let us just start off by looking at some of these issues and consider what are critical issues that we should be thinking about as far as racism is concerned.
All right. Jazakumullah khairan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The topic of this, to say, for example, I deliberately want to give this a topic called racism in Islam. And I'm deliberately choosing a provocative title so that we can get up and think. Is there any racism in Islam? No, there isn't. Is there any racism among Muslims in our homes, in our societies, and our countries? Well, let me allow you, meaning not only you, Inayet Bhai, but the listeners, I will let you reflect on that and answer it for yourself. Now, I can talk at length about what I have seen among Muslim societies in various countries that I travel to, including, of course, right where I live in Hyderabad. I'm in the United States now for the last about 7-8 months, but I'm actually from Hyderabad. I live in India. And I can talk to you at length about racism and how we practice it in our societies, but I won't. Because the purpose is not to lament and tell stories of this happened and that happened. But let us talk about solutions. So let us see what Islam says about racism. The first racist statement ever made was made at the birth of the creation of the human race itself. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered all present to make sujood to Adam alayhi salam, and Iblis, who was among those present, refused. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him, and Allah told us what his answer was in the ayat of Surah Al-A'raf. Allah said, قَالَ مَا مَنَعْكَ أَلَّا تَسْجُدَ إِذْ أَمَرْتُكَ قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ طِينٍ. Allah said, what prevented you, O Iblis, that you did not prostrate, you did not make sajda when I commanded you? And Iblis said, I am better than him. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. Now that is the first racist statement. I am better than somebody else because of my birth. Now that is the essence of racism. And what happened to that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us also what was the result of that. Allah said, قَالَ فَحَبِطْ مِنْهَا فَمَا يَكُونُ لَكَ أَن تَتَكَبَّرَ فِيهَا فَخُرُجْ إِنَّكَ مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kicked him out. Allah said, and Iblis, get down from this, from proximity to Allah. Go away, get out. It's not for you to be arrogant here. Get out, for you are among those who are humiliated and disgraced. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us very clearly what is the situation with regard to racism in Islam. And anyone who wants evidence of that, I'm giving you the evidence of the Quran itself. Then what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about diversity? Because racial diversity is a fact of life. We have people of different races, different colors, different features, and so on and so forth. So what does Islam say about that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in this beautiful ayat al-Karima, and all of us who are married, I'm sure we remember this ayat, if not anything else, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nasu attaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahidah, wa khalaqa minha zawjaha, wa batha minhuma rijalan kathiran wa nisaa. واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said very clearly, O mankind, be dutiful to your Rabb Jalla Jalaluhu. Have taqwa of Allah. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created you from a single person, Adam alayhi salam, and from him, he created his wife, Hawa alayhi salam, and from this one pair, he created many rijalan kathiran wa nisa, many men and women, and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through whom you demand your mutual rights, and don't cut the relationship of the wombs and kinship. Surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever and all watcher over you. Now very clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning here that Allah created all of us, all races, all tribes, all cultures, from the same parents, Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam. The parents of the black person and the white person and the brown person and the Chinese person and this person and that person, all of us are from the same parents. There is no doubt about this, because the one who created us is telling us. Now we can say, well, how come we are from the same parents? Because racially we are different. Well, the one who created us is not bound by genetic codes. He creates the genetic codes, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us from the same pair, but in order to show the glory and majesty of his power and khudrat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us different from each other. Now what must we do with this difference? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that. Even more clearly, Allah specified the basis of superiority of one over other. Is in Islam, do we recognize that one person can be superior to another? Yes. On what basis? Allah is telling us that. Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Allah is saying, O mankind, we have created you from one male and one female. Same subject as in the ayat of Surah An-Nisa. This is the ayat from Surah Al-Hujurat, as you know. Same couple, and we made you into different nations and tribes. We made you into different races and different ethnicities, that you may know one another, that you may recognize one another, that you may appreciate one another, that you may respect and love one another. Verily, the most honorable. Is there superiority? Yes. On what basis? The most honorable of you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that person who has the most taqwa. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Inna Allah alimun khabir. Verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowing, all aware. Now think about this, that the basis of superiority which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said is not based on race. It is not based on color. It is not based on skin, the color of the skin or the color of the hair. It is based on what stays and resides in the heart. It is based on taqwa. It is based on the awareness and the willingness and the concern for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that we say and we do. So Islam prescribes and promotes not just tolerance, but appreciation of one another's and each other's differences as being signs of the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Jalla Jalaluhu as the creator. Our difference doesn't make us superior to anyone, it just makes us different. And this difference is for us to marvel at the khudrat and power of our Rabb Jalla Jalaluhu, that He created us as He wished. He wrote into our genes that though we come from the same parents, we are different from each other. Modern genetic research, of course, shows clearly that 99.99% we are, all human beings are completely equal. But sadly, shaitan influences us to focus on the tiny difference that leads us to do what he did, which landed him in the fire. Now it's up to us to open our eyes to this and recognize the trap of shaitan and stay away from it. To see how this works, try this as an experiment. Take a plain white sheet of paper, right? Take a plain white sheet of paper like this. Put a dot in the middle, any color, put a dot in the middle, and then show it to somebody and say, what do you see? I can bet you they will say, I see this red dot or this black dot or this blue dot, whatever is the color of the dot. Now you ask them, don't you also see the paper? I mean, you're just seeing this dot. I'm showing you, what do you see? How come you don't describe this entire paper? We don't, because this is our conditioning. We are conditioned to look for differences, and we pick the difference. We don't see the huge amount of similarity. We pick that difference, no matter how small that difference is, because we are conditioned like that. And there's a wonderful video which I'm sure all of you have seen, and if you haven't seen, I will later on send you the link for that, where there's a behavioral experiment by this teacher who's also a very famous, she's a very famous anti-race activist here in the United States. She did a wonderful experiment. She's got this little class of maybe 7 or 8 year old children.
Yes.
All of them are white, and she is telling them to focus on the color of their eyes. So we've got some kids who have blue eyes and some kids who have brown eyes. So then she says, today the blue-eyed children are going to be called superior to the brown-eyed children. So now color, they're all white, looking now at the difference, which is the color of the eyes. And then she says that because the blue-eyed children are superior, she gives them a little bit of, some more things. So they will have the recess is longer. They get to play on the swings and so on and so forth. They get to eat food in a particular way and so on. So 2 or 3 small things in which they can feel superior to the brown-eyed children. Now that day passes. Next day she switches and she says, today the brown-eyed children are superior to the blue-eyed children. So they have these some other frills that they have different, which are superior or more convenient than the blue-eyed children. And after that there is a debrief, and you must see the feedback of the children, which shows how powerful and how quick conditioning is. Now, 2 Jumas ago, I think I do the Juma khutbah, and I think it was probably 2 Jumas ago that I spoke about another. It so happened coincidentally that was the Juma immediately after the killing of George Floyd, and so I was speaking about racism, and it so happened somebody sent me this little video, which again I'm sure all of you have seen, which is of this conversation between this little girl, she may be about 2 years old if that, and her mother. Now this little girl has she's eaten some cakes, so there's a little strip of cupcakes which is empty. So the mother says, did you eat the cakes? The little one says, no, I didn't eat the cakes. Now the mother has taken the video, and obviously the mother's quite proud of this kid, and she sounds very sweet. So, no, I didn't eat the cakes. So the mother says, who ate the cakes? She said, somebody else. So the mother says, are you telling me that somebody broke into the house and they did not steal the TV, and they did not steal money, and they did not steal the jewelry, but they ate the cakes? This little girl says, yes. And then, without prompting, on her own, she says, it was a black man. Now, I was absolutely horrified. When I saw this thing, I said, Wallah, I mean, this little girl who's probably about 2 years old, I don't think she's ever seen a black man in her life, right? She has never seen a black person in her life, man or woman. But she says, it was a black man. Now, she is therefore in her lie. I personally don't even like these kinds of things, because you must never teach your children to tell lies. There's nothing nice about telling a lie. So she ate the cake. She's saying, I didn't eat the cake. That's a lie. But anyway, irrespective of that, this little girl now, in order to make her lie more believable, she says it was a black man, which means the conditioning is that if it is a black man, then he will commit a crime. This is normal. I mean, black people commit crimes. This is the conditioning that is being fed into the minds. Now, I think this is where it has to begin, in the homes at the earliest ages, right? I remember a case here in America. One of our very good friends, his daughter, she's now the mother of 2-3 children, and she's a great scholar and so on, and she teaches Arabic and she teaches other things. Now she tells us a story. Soon after 9/11, she was traveling somewhere with her parents, and she was wearing a hijab. And in the airport, standing in line to check in, she said that there was this little boy with his parents standing before them. No, actually standing behind them, little boy. And she says this boy was not more than 4 or 5 years old, right? He says to this girl who's wearing a hijab, he says, "You're not going to bomb this plane, are you?" Now imagine, 4 or 5-year-old kid is telling this girl, "You're not going to bomb this plane, are you?" So this girl, she turned around to the parents. She said, "That's some nice dinner table conversation you people must be having." And that is where it begins. It begins in the home. It begins in our conversations. It begins in the kind of jokes that we do. There is nothing whatsoever that is funny about a racial joke. I mean, this is something that we must very strongly bring into the picture and explain to people. There's absolutely nothing funny about a racial joke. It is the most unfunny thing in the world. So jokes which are based on ethnicity and race, including, for example, Polish jokes, Spanish jokes, all of this kind of stuff, it's all racism. Take, for example, a lot of jokes that are in the Urdu language on Pathans. Right, and the average Pathan is supposed to be somebody who's got a blockhead. He's got more calcium in his skull than in his backbone, which is the exact opposite of all the Pathans that I know. But anyway, all of these jokes about Pathans and so on and so forth. I think this is where it begins. It is the conditioning in the homes, and this is where I think as parents we should focus on this. Inayet Wadee, in terms of change of social behavior, change of mindsets, it takes 3 generations. This is not something that happened overnight, and it is not something that is going to go away overnight. It takes 3 generations, which means I'm not talking about old people like me. I'm saying younger people, that is our children. If they consciously practice anti-racism, then 3 generations from now we can look forward to that not happening. And I'm bringing now a new term into this thing, which is anti-racism. I'm not even talking about not being racist. We need to fight racism. We need to consciously go for it, go consciously against it. Now, this is what Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did. His whole life, he consciously went against racism. He didn't just sit there and say, "You know what, I'm not racist." No. He consciously went against it. Many stories. For example, one of the famous stories is of Abu Dharr Ghifari radiallahu anhu, one of his most beloved Sahaba, one of the greatest of the Sahaba of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, one of the Muqarrabun, one of the people who came first to Islam, one of the people who made first Hijrah, the man whose dawah resulted in the entire tribe of Ghifar becoming Muslim. And then there is this wonderful incident in the Seerah where Abu Dharr Ghifari radiallahu anhu was with Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in Medina, and the people came and said there is a huge cloud of dust and it looks like maybe Medina is about to be attacked by an army. And then they discovered who was it. It was a tribe called Aslam. This whole tribe came to become Muslim. They said, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked them, "How come, who gave you dawah?" They said, the Ghifar have become Muslim, so we become Muslim. Now, who gave dawah to Ghifar? Abu Dharr Ghifari. So Abu Dharr Ghifari has the credit of 2 major tribes becoming Muslim thanks to his dawah. Both of these tribes were also highway robbers. So it was a question of not just becoming Muslim, but also becoming, good people and leaving something bad that they were doing. This Abu Dhar Ghifari, the reason I gave you all of this background is to show that I'm not talking about any ordinary person. I'm talking about somebody who was very beloved of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This Abu Dhar Ghifari radiallahu anhu one day made a racially derogatory remark to Sayyidina Bilal bin Rabah radiallahu anhu. He got angry. Abu Dhar Ghifari also was somebody with a short fuse, so he would get angry very quickly. So whatever, Allah alam, what happened, but he said to Sayyidina Bilal, "You son of a black mother." That's it. I mean, he didn't curse him or something, but he said son of a black mother. Obviously, he meant that in a derogatory manner. Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu was upset, so he complained to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam called Abu Dhar Ghifari and he said, "Have you gone back to the old ways? Have you gone back to the ways of the Jahiliyyah?" Now, Abu Dhar Ghifari radiallahu anhu was extremely ashamed. He was very contrite, very apologetic. He apologized to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he went searching for Sayyidina Bilal. When he found Sayyidina Bilal, he profusely apologized to him. And then he said, now listen to this once. Then he said to Sayyidina Bilal, "I am going to lie down on the ground and I will put my face on the ground and I want you to stamp on my face with your boot, with your shoe." Sayyidina Bilal said, "Of course, I'm not doing anything of the sort. I mean, no way I'm going to do that." But he said, "No, you have to do it." And he got angry. He said, "If you don't do it, I will complain to the Prophet." Sayyidina Bilal said, "This is good now. You want me to, and you want to complain again." But see the heart of the Sahaba. Here was a man who was, if you look at it, he had this orientation towards racism. But when it was pointed out to him, he completely removes it. He changes on the spot. The man changes. Now, this is what we need to have. Now, one of the things which I am seeing this time in the United States with this George Floyd protests is that they seem to be genuinely interested in removing racism. We have case after case of state governors. That is the highest authority in the state, the governor of the state governors, the police chiefs, which is the head of the police of the entire state, and of course, police station heads, police officers, ordinary white people kneeling down and begging the black people to forgive them for racism. Interesting thing is, they are not the actual people who behaved in a racist manner in this particular case. These are ordinary people, but they are saying, we take responsibility for what one of us did and we want you to forgive us. And this, I think, is a hugely positive thing that is happening. And I think that is what we need to focus on and say that how can we bring about this change of heart? This has to happen. This has to happen from us, and we have to first and foremost own up that we are racist. Everybody is racist, including black people. I mean, let me tell you this. Let me tell you what happened to me in Shushului, in Umfolozi, in the national park in South Africa. I was there one day and with my dear brother and friend Ibrahim Bhai Patel, and Ibrahim Bhai went inside to pay for the tickets and so on and so forth. And I got out of the car and I was standing there. There was this young black Zulu boy who was at the he was a security guard and he was at the boom. He lifts the thing. I'm just standing there. He tells me, "Go back to your country." So I said, "Which country?" He said, "India." So I said to him, "Why don't you speak to the sandparks management and tell them to put a big board saying tourists not welcome. All tourists go back. Why don't you do that?" He said, "Not tourists, only you." I said, "Me personally?" He said, No, you Indians, go back to India." So I said, "Why don't you put a board saying all Indians go back to India, Indians not wanted in Shushului, Umfolozi National Park?" And what do you do? So it's not only about white people. It's not only white people. It's not only Indian people. It is everyone who wants to see somebody else as different and inferior. And I think that is something we have to address. Now, in the United States today, it is clearly focused. The Black Lives Matter is a clear thing, and in that situation, to say all lives matter is wrong, because if you are saying that, then you are detracting from the issue of what has been happening to black people in this country from 1736. So it's like saying, if there's a street of say 10 houses and one house is on fire, and when the fire service comes, you tell them, no, you don't have to put water on that one house. You put water on all the houses. All houses are important. Yes, all houses are important, but only one is on fire. So you put out that fire first. So that is the issue as far as Black Lives Matter. Definitely Black Lives Matter. And to say in that situation all lives matter is a disservice to the black people. So we definitely don't do that. That does not mean that other lives don't matter. Of course they matter. But in this particular case, we are talking about African American people. We are talking about the historic injustice that has been done to them and which continues to be done. It has not stopped. By any means, it has not stopped. And that is why all of this outpouring of emotion. Now, all I can hope is that this just doesn't just fizzle away. It doesn't just remain with the emotion, that it actually gets translated into legislation, into education more than legislation, because we have legislation. In India, for example, there is huge racism against the Dalits, against the lower class Hindus. The legislation is all in place. It is illegal. You can technically go to jail if you do that, but do the upper caste people go to jail? Actually, no, they don't. So it is a matter also of law enforcement. It is a matter of legislation. It's a matter of law enforcement, and it is also a matter of education. As I said, it has to begin in the homes, in the nurseries, at your dining table, when you are holding that little child in your lap. What do you speak? I mean, it is as powerful as that, and that is what must change. I know. I hope I'm not going over your boundaries, time boundaries.
Sheikh Yawar, can I just stop you there for a minute? Unfortunately, time has actually run out, and I know this is a huge topic. It's a massive topic, and you've raised so many issues in terms of recognizing our differences. But I think more importantly, being social beings, and we were talking about solutions. And I think I'd like to hold you to a few programs, where possibly a series of programs to address certain specific issues. And I think we basically just touched the surface at this point in time, looking at it from an Islamic perspective and what has happened in the United States of America. But there is still a lot more from a practical perspective, and looking at certain practical solutions that we need to discuss going forward. So I'm hoping, inshallah, at some stage, we can do a series of discussions on this particular topic.
Yes, inshallah. I'm more than happy to do that, Inayet Bhai. More than happy, inshallah.
Well, then, Jazakallah for now. And yes, inshallah, looking forward to talking to you once again. Allah accept, Allah reward your efforts as well. And inshallah, we'll talk at some stage. Jazakallah for your time.
Jazakumullahu khairan wa iyyakum for you, and Jazakumullahu khairan for the opportunity, and look forward to that, inshallah. My salams to everybody there.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, that brings us straight on to 8 p.m. and we come back, and we are going to be focusing on the World Refugee Day, which took place yesterday, but a webinar, and this webinar is focused on displacement, on forced migration, and the effects of war. And we have got 5 exciting guests who will be joining us for this webinar, which is going to take us straight between 8 and 9 p.m.